Ladies and gentlemen, it is April 2nd, and we already have some trade talk to dive into. It is never too early to talk trades here on this channel. And one of the biggest targets at the trade deadline this year will be Sandy Alcantara. He just made his return this past week, going 5 innings, looking very strong against the Mets, picking up the W. And it just so happens the Mets might have some interest in Alcantara when that time comes. Now, here we go. Sandy Alcantara could be a Mets target if he gets put on the trading block in the future. A lot of the Mets players were talking very highly of Sandy Alcantara here. And Juan Soto, he was leading the way here. He had a lot to say about Alcantara, saying here, it would be one of the best trades that we could have. I know we have great pitching here, but adding a Cy Young winner like that would be huge. It's going to take a lot to get him. He went on to say here, if he goes to a team that has a chance to compete at the end, I think you are going to see who he is. He is doing that on a team that has no serious chance to go to the playoffs, but he keeps trying and competing even without run support. Whenever he goes to a winning team, you are going to see what Sandy Alcantara is capable of. Went on to say he's really smart. He knows what he's doing. He's really brave. He's not scared to come at people, and he is going to attack you when he does. Francisco Lindor, he touched on this, saying it would be almost like adding Soto. You add Soto, it's going to help the team. You add Alcantara, and it's going to help the team. Well, yeah, obviously. And then Starling Marte, former teammate of Sandy Alcantara, he wanted to say here, he has the stuff and the mental makeup to be able to play in New York. Said through an interpreter, he's got the mental strength and physical gifts to be able to have access or to have success here. And I think we have shown that we help pitchers even more. I mean, that's a really good point that he makes there. I mean, look at all the guys they brought in the past. You know, Sean Manaea, I would say the most notable guy, where they brought him in after a couple of years of struggles, and he looked fantastic for them last year. You know, look what they did for Luis Severino. You know, the list goes on and on. I also just want to point out that I find it interesting that these players are already talking about the possibility of trading for Sandy Alcantara. I can't really think of another example where you had multiple players on one team talking about the possibility of trading for a player. I don't know. I don't think there's really any example that I can point to, but let me know what you think down below in the comments. You know, what do you think about these players on the Mets that are already talking about making a trade for a guy, especially at this point in the season, you know, considering it's only April 2nd. I think the Mets would be a very good home for Sandy Alcantara, and I definitely think the Mets have what it takes to be able to get a deal done. Now, over here on Baseball Trade Values, as of right now, the values on here are dynamic, so I would imagine this is only going to get higher as we get towards the trade deadline, especially when you factor in the market as well. But with Sandy Alcantara, we all know what he can do when he's healthy. One of the best pitchers in the game. As you can see, right around $53 million in median value right now. And you're probably looking towards, especially with the bidding war that's probably going to happen for him, you're probably looking at somewhere in the $60 to $70 million range, maybe even a little bit higher than that. Now, when it comes to the Mets, they definitely have some prospects that they could deal. Okay, so here are some of their higher ranked prospects that I definitely think could be part of a package to get a deal done for Sandy Alcantara. You got guys like Brandon Sproat, the #1 prospect in their system as of right now. Jet Williams, he did miss a lot of time with injury last year, but there's a lot of upside there. Someone like Jesus Baez, there's a high potential bat with him. I could see the Marlins being intrigued with someone like that. You know, maybe even another pitching prospect like Nolan McLean. You got Carson Banger they just drafted. You know, you got Drew Gilbert, who did miss a lot of time last year, but there is a pretty good ceiling. Now, I'm not saying all of these guys would be going back to the Marlins. I'm just laying out all the players here for the values. Now, I don't know, you know, would it take someone like Brandon Sproat, one of the best pitching prospects in the game? This guy was dynamite last year in the minor leagues. I would imagine the Marlins, you know, would love to be able to get someone like him, add another pitching prospect like that to their organization. If not him, I would imagine at least someone like Nolan McLean. And don't forget about, you know, Jonah Tong as well. He looked pretty solid last year in the minor leagues and had a pretty decent spring training as well. So I would imagine at least one of these guys would have to go. But I definitely think Brandon Sproat would come up in the conversation. Let's say the Mets are hell-bent on keeping him. Let's take him out. So let's just say Nolan McLean would be in here. So, you know, Jet Williams, I could definitely see being a part of that package there. You know, there's a lot to like with him. A highly athletic player, a very good bat, gets the bat on the ball very well. He's fast. He can play multiple positions as well, center field, shortstop, whatever it may be. Someone like Carson Bench, I could see being intriguing there. He was very good in college. I could see the Marlins liking some of the upside in that bat. Maybe if you do someone like Ryan Clifford in there too, he gets on base very well, has a lot of power. He does have a knack for striking out a lot, but maybe the Marlins could like that power potential. And like I said, Jesus Baez, he's further away at this point, but there's a lot of power potential in there. So I think, maybe something like this, let's say Drew Gilbert, he was hurt a lot last year. Let's just take him out. I think maybe even some kind of a package like this could definitely get you on the right track here. But then again, we are talking about Sandy Alcantara here, one of the best pitchers in the game, and there is going to be an absolute bidding war for this guy. So you might have to throw in a couple of top 100 prospects, especially considering Sandy is under control for the next 2.5 years. So maybe you have to do something like this. Brandon Sproat, Jet Williams, as of right now, they are both in the top 100. Brandon Sproat is number 45. Jet Williams is number 56. Throw in a couple more prospects like Carson Bench, a first-round pick from this past year. Jonah Tong, who has looked pretty good. And you never know, you might have to get to this point to get a deal done. It depends on how far the Mets are willing to go. There's going to be other teams in the mix as well. I'm looking at the Orioles, right? Who knows what's going to happen with Grayson Rodriguez. Let's see if he can come back healthy. Obviously, Corbin Burns going to the Diamondbacks. I think someone like Sandy Alcantara would be massive for this rotation. Now, I definitely think someone like Kobe Mayo, who was a little disgruntled coming out of spring training, that could be a good bat for the Marlins to acquire. If not him, maybe someone like Samuel Basallo could be in a package. I think Sandy Alcantara would be massive for the Orioles. Maybe my Red Sox. I don't know, though. They have definitely put together quite the farm system over the last couple of years, but they already have a lot of starting pitching in the fold. They also just signed Garrett Crochet to a long-term extension, so I'm not sure if the Red Sox are going to be in the mix. Who knows? Maybe if some guys start getting hurt, then maybe that could be a possibility. You can never count out the Yankees, especially after losing Garrett Cole. They're probably going to have to part with someone like Spencer Jones there, but I don't know if they have the depth to be able to get a deal done like that. Again, Alcantara is going to cost a lot here, and obviously the Dodgers are always going to be in the mix. Roki Sasaki coming off a tough start last outing. There are a lot of injury concerns in this rotation. Let's see what the health is looking like at the deadline, but if they have a couple of guys going down, the Dodgers are going to be in the mix for someone like Sandy Alcantara. I wonder if the Giants, if they're in contention, maybe they can make a play there. I think that would be very good if they could add him, Logan Webb, Alcantara at the top there. You got Verlander, Robbie Ray behind him. The Rangers, I think, are going to be very good this year. There are some question marks with the health in this rotation. Nathan Eovaldi did just look very good in his last outing, a complete game. Nathan Eovaldi, Nasty Nate, absolutely love him. But Jacob deGrom, what's the health going to be looking like with him? Kumar Rocker, Jack Leiter, a couple of young guys. Let's see how they progress this coming year. So I think the Rangers could be a possibility, and they got some pretty solid prospects down in the minor leagues. I wonder if a dark horse like the Detroit Tigers could make some sense, right? You just brought back Jack Flaherty to go alongside Tarek Skubal, keeping that 1-2 punch intact from the first half last year. Could you imagine if they had Jack Flaherty in the postseason last year? That could have made a huge difference. But, who knows, depending on the health of Jack Flaherty and what's going on with some of the younger guys, maybe the Tigers could be a dark horse. But Sandy Alcantara is going to be one of the top targets at the deadline this year. The Marlins, they're going to be keeping his outings pretty limited. I don't see him really going further than 5 innings for most of his outings. He is definitely going to be on some kind of a pitch count because obviously he is coming back from Tommy John and teams are going to want him for the second half. So the Marlins, they're definitely going to be paying close attention to his outings. But, with Sandy Alcantara, like I said, we know what this guy can do. He's one of the best pitchers in baseball when healthy, and he's on a very team-friendly deal. That also factors in to his value, which we mentioned earlier, because this guy's very good and he's very affordable as well. He's on a 5-year, $56 million deal that ends next year, but he's got a club option for 2027. So he's got 3 years of control left at this point. It would be 2.5 at the trade deadline, but still, that's a lot of control. Teams out there are definitely going to be interested in acquiring this guy. It is going to be a massive bidding war. But let me know what you think down below in the comments. Do you think the Mets have a strong chance at acquiring Sandy Alcantara? And also, don't think about the fact that it's an in-division trade. The Marlins, they're so further behind these other teams in the division, it really doesn't matter. But let me know, do you think the Mets are going to be a strong contender for him? Do you think he ends up going elsewhere? Which teams do you think are going to have the best shot at landing Sandy Alcantara? But everybody, that's all I got for right now. If you counted the way out, hit that like button for me, subscribe if you're new, and I'll talk to you next time.